There is a version of you that retires 10 years earlier. Same job. Same salary. Same city. Not smarter. Not luckier. Not paid dramatically more. The only difference is 6 decisions, repeated so quietly, for so long, that this version of you never noticed making them at all. Researchers have spent decades studying exactly what those decisions are, not in theory, but in the actual bank records, tax filings, and controlled experiments of people who lived on both sides of that gap. The first of them rarely feels like a decision at all. It feels like a reward. In 1978, a team of psychologists led by Philip Brickman ran an experiment that would unsettle economists for the next 50 years. They tracked down major lottery winners and compared them to a control group and, in an unusual pairing, to people who had recently been paralyzed in accidents. A year later, the results stunned them. Lottery winners weren't meaningfully happier than the people around them, and the paralyzed group's happiness had drifted back much closer to normal than anyone predicted. Brickman called it the hedonic treadmill. Every gain resets what feels normal. The raise arrives, the apartment gets bigger, the calendar fills with nicer dinners, and none of it registers as excess, because each step only ever looks like the next reasonable upgrade from wherever you just were. The real danger was never wanting more. It was forgetting that your own definition of enough kept quietly moving right along with you. If the first habit is a treadmill running in place, the second is where that same motion finally becomes visible to everyone else. In the mid-1990s, researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent years inside the financial lives of American millionaires, not their public image, but their actual bank statements. The average car buyer, they found, spends roughly 30% of their net worth on a vehicle. The average millionaire spends about 1%. 30-1. Not a difference in income. A difference in which audience someone was optimizing for, the one watching the driveway, or the one that will never see the portfolio at all. One man made that gap almost impossibly literal. For 25 years, Ronald Red pumped gas at a filling station in Brattleboro, Vermont. Then he spent 17 more years as a part-time janitor. He drove a second-hand Toyota Yaris and mended his jacket with a safety pin rather than replace it. When he died in 2014 at 92, his family learned what none of them had ever suspected: a stock portfolio worth roughly $8 million, quietly assembled one modest, unremarkable decision at a time, and left almost entirely to his local library and hospital. His neighbors had spent decades measuring him by his income. It never once occurred to them to measure his habits instead. Ronald Read didn't become wealthy because he earned differently. He became wealthy because he repeated different decisions for 50 years. The third habit is the strangest of all 6, because it isn't really a decision. It's the absence of one. Streaming platforms and subscription services understand this better than almost anyone. They don't need you to actively choose to keep paying every month, they just need you to do nothing, and the default handles the rest. In 2004, economists Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi discovered that same default could be turned inside out. Instead of asking workers to save more today, a request almost everyone resists, they asked for something smaller: commit now to saving more later, automatically, the moment the next raise landed. 78% of workers who'd previously refused to save more agreed to the plan, and within 40 months, their average savings rate had nearly quadrupled, from 3.5% of income to 13.6%, without a single further decision. The finding later fed into Thaler's Nobel Prize. Inertia isn't the enemy. It's neutral. It just amplifies whichever direction it's already pointed in. Left unredirected, though, that same current feeds the fourth habit, and its destination is darker. Behavioral economists call it present bias, the tendency to feel the cost of paying later far less sharply than the cost of paying now, even when later comes with interest attached. It's why a minimum payment feels like relief instead of what it actually is, next month's income, quietly mortgaged to this month's decision. Nobody plans a decade of debt. It arrives in fragments, and each fragment feels manageable in isolation. The interest never checks whether it felt manageable. It just compounds. The fifth habit explains why so many people accept that risk in the first place. Not necessity. Status. Stanley and Danko's research measured that too, and it's the most quietly devastating finding in the entire study. Among the people they surveyed, those driving luxury cars and wearing luxury watches were no happier than those driving ordinary cars and wearing ordinary ones. The purchase changes how you're seen. It does almost nothing for how you feel. Picture two houses on the same street, on an ordinary Tuesday evening. One driveway holds something new, freshly washed, catching the last of the light. The other holds something older, a little tired, parked slightly crooked. Neither garage door opens. Neither owner steps outside. From the street, there is nothing to see, no clue which of the two just spent the evening moving money into an account neither neighbor will ever mention out loud. The sixth and final habit is the strangest of all, because unlike the other five, it doesn't look like a habit. It looks like the opposite of risk. A steady paycheck feels safe for a very specific reason. It's the same amount, on the same day, from the same source, month after month, and human beings read repetition as safety almost automatically. Nobody would put their entire savings into a single stock and call it responsible. The danger is obvious the moment it's written down. But a single employer, funding 100% of a household's income, rarely gets described in those terms, because it doesn't arrive as a decision. It arrives as a job offer, then a routine, then simply life. The concentration never gets voted on. It just accumulates, one ordinary paycheck at a time, until no one remembers choosing it at all. Familiarity had quietly disguised concentration as safety. And here is where all six of these threads, followed far enough, arrive at the same place. They were never six separate problems. They were one mechanism, wearing six different disguises. Lifestyle inflation, the car payment, the forgotten subscription, the slow debt, the status purchase, the single paycheck, every one of them runs on a decision made once, then never revisited again. It doesn't announce itself as a pattern, so nobody ever thinks to question it as one. It just looks like a series of unrelated, perfectly reasonable choices, right up until you notice they've all been quietly pointed in the same direction for years. There's a strange, quiet weight to realizing that. Not the weight of bad news. Nothing here required more talent, more luck, or a different starting point than the one you actually had. It's the weight of noticing that the pattern was always visible, in plain sight, in a portfolio, in a driveway, in a paycheck, and simply never looked like anything worth naming until someone described it out loud. Most people who hear this will recognize it immediately. Very few will still be thinking about it by tomorrow. Somewhere out there, right now, that other version of you still exists. Same salary. Same city. Same ordinary Tuesday. The only difference is that years ago, something interrupted the pattern for one single decision, and never got the chance to resume. Everything after that simply followed. The future rarely changes in one dramatic decision. It changes because one small decision never gets reversed.